And welcome once again to Flashpoints. I'm Bob Orr, joined by Juan Zarate. Juan, the subject now is cyber attacks and potential damage they could do. I don't think most people understand exactly how grim this might be.
Yeah, what you've had over the course of the last 2 years, Bob, is an increasing crescendo of caution and warning from the experts in this field, saying, look, we're really facing a potential cyber 9/11 or cyber Pearl Harbor, that our systems are vulnerable, our electrical grid, our financial systems, our critical infrastructures that are tied to the internet, and we are getting attacked on a more vicious and consistent basis than in the past, and it's part of the threat landscape now. You have not just nation states, China, Russia, that have been named specifically by the U.S. government, but also non-state actors who may be in this field. And we've had lots of recent incidents to raise concerns. Banks being hit very hard with denial of service attacks. You've had government agencies and defense contractors hit and hacked. Lots of reports from private sector groups saying the number of attacks are on the increase, costing billions of dollars in intellectual property. And so this is a real problem, and you're hearing this more and more from officials with a question of what you do about it. And that's really, I think, where the U.S. government is stuck.
I think the challenge is a lot of people haven't focused on this, because when you talk about cyber, their eyes kind of glaze over, and they think you mean, oh, your bank account might be compromised, your identity might be stolen. But we're talking about something on a much grander scale.
Yeah, what you're talking about, and you're seeing this in the documents put out, for example, by the Pentagon, is the nexus between the ethereal internet, what may be happening with gigabytes that we don't see, and the physical world. And the reality in the 21st century is that, especially in the United States, more and more of our physical infrastructure, what we're able to do here on the set, for example, or at home, water systems, electrical grids, are tied to the internet, tied to the ability to manipulate and to operate these systems via online management. That creates vulnerabilities. And the reality as well, Bob, what makes it different than sort of securing a port or securing a government building is much of this cyber domain and the physical domain is in the private sector's hands. About 80% of it is in the control of the private sector. So the government can do and say all it wants, but if it doesn't do it in coordination and carefully with the private sector, it's not going to be very effective.
Congress took a crack at this with a cybersecurity bill that failed, in which it would have required businesses to voluntarily keep everybody in the loop about attacks. That couldn't even get passed. Now the president, White House, working on executive orders that could put some authorities in place, but I think we're being warned on all fronts that that won't even be enough.
No, that's right, because what you have to do is have a framework with the private sector that allows not just information sharing, who's being attacked, what kinds of attacks, what are the actors, but also a way of collaborating so that the expertise of the government, for example, the National Security Agency, which focuses very heavily on this, that can see where attacks maybe are coming from, can see the new methodologies being used by hackers or states, that kind of information can be shared and that they can operationalize it so that the government can actually help a Google or a Bank of America to defend against these attacks before they happen, or to monitor them as they're happening and then shut them down. And so that framework is a very different one than classic sort of national security or homeland security, and it's why I think you've seen so much grappling in Congress with how to actually work with the private sector and perhaps even force the private sector to pay for some of this. And that's where a lot of this debate has boiled down. What are we going to force the private sector to actually do and pay for? And this is an unresolved debate, Bob.
Finally, as we wrap up, it's the way we have to think about this. In the past, theaters of war have been land, sea, air. Right. Now Secretary Panetta and others have said cyber counts too. That's another theater.
Right. I think that's right. And the military has been establishing doctrines now for a number of years to try to conceive of the cyber domain as a new domain or as a separate domain. I think that there's a little bit of a problem with that, because cyber in some ways impacts all of the other domains. And so it's not kind of its separate zone. I think what makes it so potentially damaging and interesting is the fact that cyber impacts everything else that we do in the military, in our economy, in our government. And so this is a whole of government, whole of nation question that we don't really have great structures for, and I think that's why you're seeing grappling. And I don't think it won't be until we have an actual event, when the lights go out, when the water's not pumped, when we've lost a lot of financial data, that we're going to actually truly grapple with this, because in some ways it's unimaginable, just like 9/11 was unimaginable.
It's an ongoing threat, and it's one we will revisit many times, I'm sure.
Yep, thank you,
Juan,
Bob.
thanks as always, and thanks to you for watching Flashpoints. I'm Bob Orr. We'll see you next time.